feeling. It's alright, this happened once before.
Welcome back for season 2 of This Happened Once Before, a conversational podcast between generational Phish fans. I'm your host, Bill, and this season I continue to connect with other fans and discuss our shared love of the band, how they found their way to the music, and some of their favorite shows and jams. Then in the second part of the podcast, we discuss a Phish show from the band's era between 1988 through 1996. If you're a new listener, welcome. And for friends of the podcast, welcome back. As a reminder, please like, subscribe, write a review for the podcast so that you can be notified when new episodes are released. And it also helps others find the podcast easier. The release of the premiere episode of season 2 will be coinciding with the start of the much anticipated Phish 2024 summer tour. This year has already seen historical events with the New Year's Eve Gamehenge performance, a 40-minute chalk dust torture with reprise in Mexico, followed by the incredible 4-night run at Sphere. This summer sees them play 18 shows at some of their favorite venues before culminating in Montegreen, the first Phish festival since Magna Ball in 2015. I hope to meet and speak to many of you this summer, and if you're attending Montegreen and would like to be part of the podcast, email me at happenedoncepebefore@gmail.com or on Instagram at thobpodcast as well. Reminder to be safe this summer, take care of each other, and get ready for what could be the best summer of Phish in a long time. In season 1, we focused on shows that I remember having quality bootleg copies of, but not official releases from the band. In season 2, I've decided to highlight shows that were historical or fun firsts for the band. We'll cover everything from new equipment, venues, and pop-up shows that occurred during the band's early rise in popularity. So to kick season 2 off, I had an amazing conversation with Andrew. He is a second-generation Phish fan who didn't get it from the backseat of the car as a kid, but more so as he got older. We'll talk about that experience, how he found his way to the band, and why he was so excited to talk about this specific show. Then we dive into the show from February 3rd, 1993 at the Portland Expo in Portland, Maine, for a night of many firsts, but nothing more impactful to the long-term sound of the band than the introduction of Page's grand piano. Their excitement to have it on stage comes through from the opening song, another first that becomes a fan favorite over the next 30 years. This tour opener happens the day after the release of Rift, and the band is about to hit the road hard for the next 3 to 4 months. But before we jump into that show, I wanted to give my review of Alex's recommendation from the final episode of season 1. He recommended the show from August 4th, 2021 in Nashville, Tennessee. This show really provides a fantastic snapshot of where the current sound of the band is at. A well-placed first set with personal highlights of Ocelot, a locked-in theme from the bottom. But they really save the explorations for the second set. Alex was 100% on point when pointing out that ghost gin transition. And very early into the gin, it's evident it won't be a run-of-the-mill time in the bathtub. split open and melt that melds early and doesn't let go. Cemented this as a fantastic recommendation from Alex. Thank you for a good one. Now let's head to Portland, Maine for a night of firsts on this episode of This Happened Once Before. Tarps and show supplies, Tony'sTarps.com. Are you a fan who demands more space than you paid for?
Tony's got you covered.
Did you enjoy squeezing your friends into areas where they don't belong?
Tony's got you covered.
Need a 20 by 20 foot tarp for you and a friend to treat as your private disco?
Tony's got you covered.
And just in time for festival season, Tony has released their special 40 by 40 foot festival fun pack.
Boom! Take the double space.
Use a promo code Happened Once Before when ordering, and Tony will personalize your tarp for free.
For nothing.
No longer tell people to move out. Now just point and stare until the message is received.
Scram, get out of here.
Tony'sTarps.com, bringing you the ability to pretend Phish is playing just for you.
Tony's got you covered.
Welcome to another episode of This Happened Once Before, a generational podcast conversation about the band Phish. I'm your host, Bill, and today I'm very happy to have with me my guest.
Hey, I'm Andrew.
Andrew, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Is this where you want me to introduce myself?
Yeah. Tell me about yourself. Like, what got you to Phish? How many? We'll get into a longer conversation about shows you've seen and things like that. But why don't you start telling everybody how you found the band themselves?
Sure. Yeah. So I was born into fishdom. My father's been going to shows since '91, and so I listened to Phish all my life growing up. First, I hated it, and then when I was about 21, I started really listening to the music, and I was like, actually, I kind of dig this. Probably around the time I started smoking weed.
whether those are congruent or not, we don't know. But like, I think the age has something to do with it too, right? Like, Mark Twain said, when I was 14 years old, I couldn't believe how ignorant my parents were. When I turned 21, I was amazed how much they learned in 7 years. Right.
Yeah.
Like, so like, that's that part of life. Right. And you start locking in on those things, and it's a lot different hearing it at 21 than in the back seat. When you're 14, you try to pave your own way with music. So what were you into when you weren't, bucking against listening to Phish as a teenager?
I listened to like a lot of Slipknot at the time, pop punk stuff. Just sort of doing my own thing,
No, yeah, that's it. But I think that's an important part of everyone's musical journey, right? Because, like you said, your dad laid the groundwork, and listen, Phish is not an easily accessible band, musically.
Yeah.
So especially for a kid, right? Like once you get over like maybe the Sesame Street kind of sound and kiddish kind of fun to it, like it's some serious music that you got to get your head around. But Slipknot are great musicians, right? Like, so musicianship is obviously something that you like listening to in a band.
Yeah.
And when did the aha moment happen for you?
I was playing Clone Hero. I don't know if you know that one.
Okay.
And I had like all the different games or whatever, and Llama was one of the songs I had, and I played it, and I was like, actually, this song goes crazy.
And how old were you at this point?
I was probably 21.
Okay. So then you started, so like now Llama wouldn't be the first song you heard, obviously, because being the kid who's hearing it your whole life, right? Like you probably couldn't even fathom what that would be. So and Llama is a great entry point for someone who's listening to, that new metal, that accelerated sound. Real Phish at their fastest almost. Where did you go from there?
And then it was Picture of Nectar. I just was listening to that album, Tweezer, Guela Papyrus. I hadn't really expanded much outside of that until I started seeing them live.
Really cool. So you didn't seek out like, your dad's collection or anything like that, or his guy. You're just like, hey, the hell with it, I'm gonna go figure this out on my own, have my own journey.
Yeah, sort of.
That's awesome. Now, what other bands have come into your purview, once you got away from, do you still listen to that type of, like, do you still listen to Slipknot? I know they're still touring and stuff.
Somewhat. I mean, mostly these days it's all indie and jam band stuff.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
Phish will take up a lot of your time.
it's like 90% of what I listen to.
It's funny you said, because one of the things I'm adding and into the podcast is every episode now I'm going to recommend an album that's not Phish. Because like what
Okay.
I've realized, like there's some dope albums out there that like, classics that like I just haven't gotten to because I'll listen to that show again or whatever it is, right? But
Mhm.
yeah, that the fandom, the volume of available music that we all have at our fingertips is yeah, you could wind up not listening to anything else for your whole life.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's so many shows on Live Fish.
So you now, like, and this is a really cool segue for you because you go from really, having a kind of a broad sense knowledge of the music, right? Because it's always been kind of the soundtrack in the background for you, and then you're starting to go in for yourself and limited to, like you were saying, Nectar before your first show. So where did you get to see your first show?
I was actually in Orange Beach, Alabama.
Really?
Yeah, we had a family trip down there. It was me and my sister's birthday, and my dad, they love to vacation in Orange Beach. My family does, and my
Oh, so
dad,
that wasn't abnormal for you to go down there.
no,
Okay, cool.
no, it wasn't. And but Fish just happened to be playing that weekend of my birthday, and I was like, you know what, I'll go with you, Dad. Went to the run with him.
Wow.
It was phenomenal.
Wow. That must have been a hell of an experience for him.
Oh yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, wow, that's great. So what year was this?
This was 2022.
And how many shows have you seen since then?
Including those shows, 13 shows.
So you made the most of your time.
Yeah, I mean any chance I get, I've been waiting for the summer tour announcement to pick my vacation weeks.
And they've been dragging their feet, right? Like we're almost into
Yeah.
March, the end of this week,
Oh
and
yeah.
everybody was hoping a couple weeks ago. But I think, I think we were talking about this a little bit before we started. There's like this skeletal structural thing that you can kind of work around, like, all right, Dick's is definitely going to happen, Deer Creek, the festival, things along those lines that you can kind of pencil in, and then let's see where they fill it in from there.
Yeah.
So what's that venue like down in Alabama? That must be a pretty unique place. Is it
It
new?
was really cool. I mean, it was like it's called the Wharf Amphitheater, so it's like right there on the Gulf Coast,
Oh, cool.
and it was pretty small. I want to say like a 10,000 capacity, and it wasn't entirely full. Um, but it was. I mean, it definitely felt more closeness to the band as opposed to a place like United Center or Alpine Valley.
Yeah, yeah. United Center is. I've only seen Radiohead there, and that place is enormous. Though I felt
It's
that.
huge.
Yeah, that's a great place to see a great light show, but like it felt so big, so big. So now that you've gotten in and starting to get your legs underneath you, how much have you dived into, the catalog, the back catalog now? Because you really, started out with just the studio stuff, but once you get the live stuff going, that's kind of where you wind up heading usually.
So yeah, I have Live Fish Plus. So I like to take time and listen to some of the older shows. I went through the whole Baker's Dozen not that long ago. But not a lot of the really older stuff, not a lot of none of the 80s stuff and hardly any of the early 90s.
Yeah, and I'm happy to hear that, right? Like that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast is because we got to this point in the band's fandom, right? Like I'm close to your dad's age, right? I saw my
Mhm.
first show in '93. So, this is a very different band than the band that your dad and I got into, right? The
Oh
band
yeah.
that played a million miles an hour. So it's interesting to me to like find folks like yourself who, you know, finding the band now at the age you found them at, what is it about them now that appeals to you?
Well, I love weird music. Always have. Like ever since I was like 15. Weird lyrics specifically. Like I used to listen to like Panic at the Disco and they, just say whatever. And so like listening to like Stash where, the lyrics are just nonsense practically, is amazing. I love it.
Is it what are you one of those folks who like will listen to it over and over again until you memorize like every nook and cranny lyric of the song?
Oh yes, I can do the whole beat. I can do everything.
So and that must be so let me ask you this as someone who is looking backwards at the whole catalog, right? Because you're for all intents and purposes a new-ish fan, right? You're not a new
Oh yeah.
fan, but you're newish. Like, what do you feel is the most? Is it? I don't want to say overwhelming, but like, do you feel it's overwhelming to like try to get back into it, or do you feel like this is something that you're like, I could just pick it up from here and go forward?
Um, I I wouldn't say I necessarily find it overwhelming, but there is a lot of old shows to listen to. So it can be hard to choose one. Oftentimes I go back and I'm like, I'm just going to listen to MSG 95 again. But
The oldie but a goodie.
oh yeah, it's so good. One day I'll have it on vinyl.
It's hashtag vinyl goals.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's interesting to me. So when you say that, right, how do you decide where you're going to go back to?
I usually go to the year section and then slide it and pick a random year.
Really?
Uh,
Just leave it all a
yeah.
chance.
Yep. And then I'll like close my eyes and random pick a show.
That's a great way to do it, man. That's a very efficient way to do it. And you're not beholding yourself to anything at that point, which is great.
Yeah. And then I just listen to it all the way through.
What's the best show you've heard doing that?
Um, uh, it was one of the 2000 Japanese shows with Split Open
The
and Melt.
Yeah, is that
I
the
can't,
Fuji?
I couldn't tell you exactly what date, but Fukuoka or something.
Yeah, and like that's what I'm thinking about the beauty of that experience, right? Like because a lot of this music is still new to you, so to be able to have that experience of just like spinning the wheel
Oh yeah.
and
Sometimes it's a great show. Sometimes it's just all right.
that's life. Yeah, I like how you said that though, right? It's never bad. It's
It's
never
never
bad.
bad.
Yeah,
It's
it's
never
never
bad.
bad. What
Except Coventry.
well, it has a skip button. You,
That's true.
you don't have to stay. Um, what do you feel is the best part of the scene right now?
Um, I see. I would say like the togetherness that I feel in the stadiums. Like, yeah, at the end of the day, we're all there for the exact same reason. Um, and it's nice to be surrounded by other people that feel the same way. Wanna just want to hear the music.
As someone who listens to and has listened to music outside the jam band community, because like I really don't, other than like Wilco and Vampire Week, bands that are peripherally around there, but like are does that feeling exist in other music? Like, do you get that feeling at Slipknot? Does that or Panic at the Disco? Do people have that kind of vibe there as well?
It's not the same. like at so I've been to a few shows before I started going to Fish and other jam band shows, but it's people there are more people that are there just to be like I was there
Mhm.
rather than there to hear what is going to be played. And the vibe is never as strong.
Yeah, that's something I've always figured, right? But like,
Mhm.
you know, and it really is that specific purpose, right? Like that the folks there for that music and locking everybody in and that mindset um, is a very real, tangible thing that you feel seeing
Oh yeah.
Fish.
The only band I've ever seen that came somewhat close was BTS actually.
Huh.
I don't know if you know BTS,
I
but
do not.
they are a K-pop group.
Oh, okay. Yes, I do then. I didn't want to say it was a K-pop group and be like, oh, the old man doesn't know what he's talking about. But okay, I did know what I was talking about. So
And
yes, I
the
did know who they are. Yeah.
yeah, the people there felt like they were there specifically to see the group rather than
Yeah. Yeah. I would imagine that's like seeing the Beatles in like, the early 60s, mid 60s, like when people
yeah.
just screaming and you can't barely hear anything happen.
Yeah, that's a lot like what it was like, I'm sure. It was I mean the energy was crazy there.
And that's like I would imagine different energy.
Oh yeah, it was a lot of like 15-year-old girl energy.
Maniacal, yeah, yeah, maniacal energy of energetic 15-year-old girls versus like the mellow, excited energy of an average 25-year-old age, whatever it is at a Fish show, 35
Yeah.
probably. Uh, so have you had a chance to talk to your dad or anyone else experience about how the scene has changed or what's different from back then to now?
Not really. I mean, he talks a little about how like, you know, this and this was different but it's mostly about the band rather than the scene.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
know, like,
that's
oh,
probably
they
because
used to do this, but
that's fun though. That's a great resource, right? And that's a great
Mhm.
resource to have because he's seen these evolutions of them and how many point ohs people want to say it is. But like, um, ask your dad. He'd probably laugh at that because he's probably on like 10.0 in his head as far as
Yeah.
what Fish is. But so it's good to have that person to lean into when you're like, hey, has it always been like this? Like, no, that's new.
Yeah.
Uh, so as far as the overwhelming aspect, you don't feel looking backwards at the catalog. I feel like with the way you attack it, it takes a little bit of that overwhelming out of it.
Hmm.
Like
For
just
sure.
spinning the wheel and being like, hey, I don't really care what I'm listening to. I'm going to be happy and content with whatever comes up on the dial.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I've got, I got plenty of time left to listen to their entire catalog.
Hell yeah, man! As long as they keep making more, which
They
is even
keep
better.
making more.
It's not like that. It's a finite amount right now. It's still coming.
Hmm.
So do you consider Llama the first Fish song you really heard?
No. When I was a little kid, like 7 or 8, I was a fan of Cavern.
Mm,
Specifically
great
the
little kid
ending.
song. Yeah.
Yeah, give the director a serpent deflector, that whole part. I loved
Well, for
that.
a kid who loves lyrics, right? Like as a 7-year old, that and like it does sound like these fun, nonsensical lyrics. Like it must have really been like, whoa, what the heck is this? Like a nursery rhyme.
Yep. Oh yeah. So that was my first Fish song I ever liked.
What was your favorite part of that first show down in Alabama?
So in Alabama, that first show, I got to hear Llama. It was it was slow Llama.
Okay.
And I was super into it. It was the second set opener, and I really that's when I started dancing, getting in the move. Before that, I was sort of chilling there because I wasn't sure what to do.
Still feeling it out, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then the end of the second set, Chalk Dust Torture, and I just lost my mind.
The hook, line, and sinker, they got you at that point. Yeah.
Oh, they did. And then I was in for the ride.
That was one of two nights, or was that just one
It
of
was
one
the
night?
It was the first of three.
Oh, so you had still two more. So that must have been a great way to like get that chalk dust torture and really get you in the mindset for the next two nights of like from the moment you walked in, you were in.
Oh yeah, and I just carried that wave the whole weekend.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
And I was thinking about that slow llama. It's like that is the joke of Phish. Like you got pranked, right? Like
yeah,
you love this fast llama your first show, and you get that slow llama. It's like you could either love or hate that.
and I loved it.
Yeah, no, but I'm
I
saying
was
if
a
you were
huge
like
fan.
if you love fast llama, and you're like, oh my god, that's the version they play. You could have
Oh, I
come out
get
on the
it.
other side, but
And that's what
there
my
you
that's
were.
what my dad was saying. He was like, "You kind of got pranked."
It really was like and it's a good way to get in on the joke that is the band too, right? Like this is there's a lot of jokes inside of jokes here.
Hmm.
And as Trey said, like he doesn't take himself seriously, but he takes the music seriously. That's always evident too. So as long as you're doing both, it sounds like you are. Um, the rest of that weekend must have been incredible.
Oh, it was awesome, and I didn't even realize it at the time, but they busted out some really crazy ones. So I
Slow
love going
Llama is
back.
even a crazy one, man. Like I think that's everything was a bust out for you though. That's the best part about that point.
That's true. But like looking back, there was two from pre Baker's dozen that hadn't been busted out in forever.
Something
And
your
that
dad
was,
would have liked.
oh yeah, yeah. He mentioned one of them at the time.
Which was what? Do you remember?
My mind's got a mind of its own.
Ah, that's funny because I saw they played was it Set Your Soul Free the other night?
Oh yeah,
Which like that's kind of the same era in my head. That's Set Your Soul Free and the not Set Your Soul Free, My Soul,
yeah.
not Set
My
Your
my
Soul,
soul.
but My Soul, My Mind's Got a Mind of Its Own. Like that's kind of like the same era for me. So that's a great bust out. That's a really good one.
Yeah, yeah. It was cool.
What's the favorite show you've attended of the 13 so far?
Friday night United Center.
Yeah, that
So
was a
Friday
hot
the
one.
13th.
Was that the No Quarter?
No, it was they played what was it that night? They played Cross-Eyed and Painless.
Okay. Yeah. I was
Um,
hoping to play that in Dayton. You guys got
I actually called it that morning with my dad. I was like, I think they're gonna
it.
play Cross-Eyed and Painless. I want to hear it because I was getting into the Talking Heads at the time, and yeah, it was awesome.
See? And there you go. And then you got a really good version of it. It made up for that, the expectation of that slow llama. And then here you go. You get another world version of Cross-Eyed and Painless.
Hmm.
Is there a show besides that New Year's Eve '95 that is a favorite that you've listened to that you didn't attend?
Yeah, the Lawn Boy show from Baker's Dozen.
Hmm.
Lawn Boy is one of my favorites. So the 30-minute Lawn Boy just takes the cake for me.
That I would imagine. That's when I knew everything was available in the catalog.
Oh yeah.
That there was nothing off limits that was going to be. You and I were talking about that 40-minute chalk dust torture down in Mexico, but like, there's nothing off the table now. What can be expanded?
No,
You
they can do
know,
anything.
back when when your dad and I started listening to the show we're going to talk about later, there was certain you knew the jam vehicles, right? All right, here comes Tweezer, here comes yeah, we know we're gonna get jammed out here. And now it's like it's whatever's up next has that chance. And that leads itself to even more infinite possibilities, I think, as they get older.
Oh yeah.
We're probably not too far away from like a one song set.
I would be so happy.
Mexico's probably the best place to do that.
Yeah.
Because everybody's already chilled and relaxed. Nobody has any real expectations like the garden or someplace crazy.
Hmm.
Is there a song that you frequently find yourself like recommending to others to try to lure them in?
Um, yeah, well, it depends on the person, right? And what genres they're because I think anyone who likes any genre can really join into the Phish band sort of community. But depending on where they're from, they need to hear the right songs to introduce them. Like I'm not gonna give Chalk Dust Torture to a jazz fan necessarily,
Right.
but Chalk Dust Torture is one that because I think it's just generally very high energy and positive.
I'm gonna ask you, I was just thinking about this as you were talking about other music. I remember having a guest on, and their musical path started being, big Iron Maiden fans. And I was thinking about this with Slipknot. Is there a place that Phish and Slipknot meet? Like, is there an overlap? Is there a Venn diagram somewhere in the world, or are they very polar opposites in every way?
I wouldn't say they're necessarily polar opposites. I'd say like something like Carini
Hmm.
would be somewhat close, but I'd say it
Okay.
was more the indie side that sort of got me into Phish rather than or like I'm also like a prog rock fan, like King Crimson and Pink
Hmm.
Floyd. So that sort of is more what got me in there.
That's a great sideways entry into Phish.
Yeah.
Most people like myself, I can only speak for myself, I shouldn't say most people, but like myself, like I didn't find King Crimson until after I found Phish, or Zappa even for that matter. So like that's even
Mhm.
cool because like you're already far out expanding before you even come back to something you can see live, which is great, you know. What are you hooked on now?
In what respect?
Like what song are you hooked on now? Let me be more like is
Oh,
there
Phish song?
yeah,
My Friend, My Friend.
any particular version?
Um, no, not really, but just that section of the song where it starts getting
Yeah.
just drives me nuts every time.
And this one had the show we're going to talk about has a little unique aspect to that. My friend in there.
Oh yeah, I was
Uh,
I was very happy to see it.
I'm sure. I'm sure. What's your favorite studio album?
Rift.
Well, you must have been real happy listening to this
I
shit.
was I was like, this must have been set up for me.
Again, right? Like your karmic lineup for Phish is really hitting hard, man.
Yeah.
Um, is there a venue? Obviously, there has to be. You've only gotten, you've got 13 shows under your belt, but where's the venue that you can't wait to see them that you haven't had a chance to see them yet?
Well, I think I haven't been to a ton of venues. Obviously, I love seeing them at Alpine Valley, but and I don't think they'll ever play Red Rocks again. But I think that would be pretty awesome. But I
It
think
would.
they're a little too big for Red Rocks these days.
Yeah, yeah. The resurgence has probably put the kibosh on that.
Yeah.
The 2020s have
Hmm.
have probably put an end to that, I would think. Um, but I would really like to see them there. But I'd like to see Dick's too. I've been there, so that's definitely Colorado Fish is probably something insane.
I saw him at Dick's last year. It was phenomenal.
See, so yeah, and I've gone back and listened to a couple of the 2015 and 20, some of the older ones, and it's like they consistently just deliver in that
Oh
venue
yeah.
every time they go. What's your favorite cover song they do?
Loving Cup.
Almost like we planned it ahead of time, then.
It really was. I saw the show and I was like, there's no way.
That's crazy. That's so funny. So, last one before we jump into the show. Boy, man, God, or shit.
Boy.
Boy, man. All right, boy. Another vote for the boy. Tarps and show supplies, Tony'sTarps.com. Are you a fan who demands more space than you paid for?
Tony's got you covered.
Did you enjoy squeezing your friends into areas where they don't belong?
Tony's got you covered.
Need a 20 by 20 foot tarp for you and a friend to treat as your private disco?
Tony's got you covered.
And just in time for festival season, Tony has released their special 40 by 40 foot festival fun pack.
Boom! Take the double space.
Use a promo code Happened Once Before when ordering, and Tony will personalize your tarp for free.
For nothing.
No longer tell people to move out. Now just point and stare until the message is received.
Scram, get out of here.
Tony'sTarps.com, bringing you the ability to pretend Phish is playing just for you.
Tony's got you covered.
So we've been alluding to this show so far. So the show we're going to talk about today is February 3rd, 1993 at the Portland Expo in Portland, Maine. So, a couple things before we start diving into the show. Andrew, you said Riff was your favorite album. This is the day after Riff came out.
Yep.
So you can kind of hear how giddy they are starting the tour off, not too far, obviously, from Vermont, in front of familiar folks. But with Riff being out, the show features, a nice mix of songs from that album in their original form and some in a different form, that you kind of don't hear nowadays. But it's also the debut of a couple of tunes. There's a debut of some other things going on. But I thought it was real interesting that the tour was starting February 3rd.
Yeah.
And for anyone who thinks you missed out on Phish, go look at how much Phish played from February 93 through, I wrote it down, through the end of May, took June off and played all July and August.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's insane. Like it's a really insane. I was like February 3rd, like what a weird way to kick off like weird time of year.
Yeah.
And they played everywhere for the next 5-6 months. They covered America. But they're starting out close to home in Portland. But right off the bat, we get the debut of not only a song, but the grand piano. On stage with the band for the first time. So the first song, I guess you called this one too, is the debut of Loving Cup, which, obviously has gone on to become, I would imagine, most people's top 5-10 favorite cover songs they do. But it's kind of crazy to hear the first one here.
Oh yeah. It's definitely not the same as hearing it now. Because they're, first time the debut of it, they're still working out the kinks, how they want to play it. But it was nice to hear. When I found out that was the debut, I was very surprised.
Yeah, they sound stoked to play it. Like to your point, like it's not like the tightest, greatest version of Loving Cup, but like you can hear how happy they are to like they've been working that and finally now to play it on stage. Um, with this piano in the mix now, they definitely are stoked to get the debut out.
Mm-hmm.
So then comes the first pop-up of Rift for the night, which, for the record, like this was so tight. Like anything off Rift in the show is just played
Really
note for
practice.
note. Yeah, it's just so practiced. You could just tell. And that's actually I didn't know this was the night after the release. I was listening to the show today and I was like, everything sounds really crisp from Rift. I'm like, when did that come out? I'm like, oh, okay, 24 hours prior. That makes sense.
Yep.
But and you can kind of hear it a little bit, I think, with the audience in those first two songs because it sounds like a small show that there's probably not a lot of people there. February, Maine, I gotta imagine it's cold as shit and snowy as shit, at that time of year. But they're not going to be familiar with Love and Cup unless they're like a Stones fan. That's like a deep cut. Riff being somewhat new, with the album coming out. But when Fee starts up, when the block on Fee starts up, is where, at least for myself, it was like the first like real crowd reaction of the show.
Mhm.
Like of that, oh wow, we know this one.
Yeah.
Like we okay, cool. Um and a bullhorn on top of it.
Yep. Yeah, I noticed that as well. People, I mean, the crowd really started getting loud when Fee started up.
And that leads us to your next song, which, and this is kind of where I think eh, the the tipping point for the rest of the show comes into play. Like I think this is where from the moment this song happens through the rest is where they kind of lock themselves in for the rest of the night because 2 minutes into Llama, like, and I wrote that down. I was like 2 minutes in, like Paige is just firing for
Yeah.
the firing.
Yeah, Paige was definitely on fire. You could tell he was having fun having the grand piano on stage. Just like
Exactly.
excited.
Yes. What did you think of that version compared to, being a llama guy, slow or fast?
Uh,
What'd you think of that one?
I really liked it. I thought it was, I mean, it's longer than a fast llama normally is. Normally being around 3 minutes. So it was exciting to hear, and I'm always in a good mood anytime I hear it.
It really is. That's a good way to say that, right? Like it's hard to be in a bad mood after a llama. Like or
Oh
just
yeah.
not like or stagnant even for that matter. Uh then comes the second debut of the night with a really different bluesy kind of intro, the wedge. Which I thought was kind of interesting because that intro to me sounded different. I haven't listened to Riff the album in a long time, but
Hmm.
I would imagine to me that sounded different than definitely the wedges we get now.
Yeah.
But I thought any wedge that I was familiar with.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was a little different, but not too far off the studio version. I listened to the studio album like a few times a week, usually.
And
Um,
does it have that bluesy, slowed down beginning?
um, Sorta. Uh, Not exactly. Right now, I mean, I listened to this part of the show like a week and a half ago, so it's a
Hmm.
little off memory, but I think it's similar, but not exactly. It's definitely a little different.
And that was something I was like, oh, okay, like, and then to realize like Riff came out the night before, and I'm like, oh, I wonder how different that is from the album version. But I
Hmm.
think it's been so long that like they've cut that front part off a little bit, and you kind of just starts up with that mic bass line, right? Like I think that's where it was a little like, oh, okay, cool. This is a different version. I kind of like that intro. I was like, oh, they should bring that back, especially with the way Page has all those tools at his disposal now. I
Hmm.
thought that bluesy intro was really cool. Divided Next, which was like, very much like Fee,
Yeah.
um, strong from the jump, really well played. And, I would imagine this was, a song that they had just practiced so much at this point that it was like, anybody who was seeing them with regularity between following them around at this point was probably seeing some of the better Divided Skies
Hmm.
of their career, I would think, with the way
So
this one sounded.
Yeah, I wanted to mention this. I wrote a whole thing of notes about the show for the podcast, and the top of my notes just says, "Holy fuck, that divided sky killed."
Well said. Well
Yeah.
said. Right? Like
Uh,
I couldn't have said it better myself.
yeah, I remember hearing it and I was like, this is great.
And it really it goes to, the dichotomy between Divided Sky and the next song. It's the two heads of the same coin of Phish, right? Like,
Hmm.
so you have this, to your point, Burn It Down, Divided Sky, Note Perfect. And then they bring out the incredible Beast Boy Tubbs with the trombone for an I Didn't Know, which I had never heard him referred to as the incredible Beast Boy Tubbs before. So that's a new one for Fishman. But like those songs back to back, right? Like I think that's an interesting thing that you wouldn't necessarily see now, right? It's a little bit of a jarring transition.
Oh yeah, it's definitely the duality of Fish shown just shoved right in your face. You know,
Yeah,
this
almost
tough.
intentional, right? Like it almost felt
Yeah.
like, okay, you thought like, all right, yeah, that was cool, but like watch how funny we could be. And I think Fishman makes a comment about it. Is it later in the show after he comes back out with the vacuum and he's like, all right, we're gonna be serious now, before they go into possum. But like that to me was like when I was listening to it, I was like, wow, that was an interesting choice to go into that. But maybe, that along those lines of like, look how weird we could be
Yeah.
mindset.
Yeah, I had never heard that song before, so this was brand new to me.
It's
Uh,
written by the same guy who wrote Haley's Comet.
okay.
Like a friend of theirs in college. Like he wrote those two songs, I believe. Um, but yeah, it's a fun. It's not long. It's got a little wacky side to it. But moving on, and then this is kind of where we were talking about my friend before, and here comes my friend, and what my first note here is with acoustic guitar.
Yeah. Yeah, which is, a little different, but welcome, I
Yeah, I
felt.
mean, and especially in '93, right? I think
Yeah.
that, like, is something that was definitely, it didn't last very long. It wasn't something that he did. I don't know how, if it carried over even into '94. Um, very much playing the acoustic intro on that. But he eventually puts that down and picks up the electric and really just starts getting crazy about the 5 minute mark, probably around that time that you were saying is
Yeah.
your favorite part of the song.
Oh yeah.
Did you have any feedback on my friend on this version?
Um, nothing crazy. I thought it was a great rendition. Obviously they've been playing it a lot recently with the album coming out the day before, but yeah, I mean, I was a fan. I think I'm always gonna be a fan every time they play my friend.
And then that leads into the next two songs with Poor Heart and Galula. Like that, like the crowd knew both these songs, right? And
Hmm.
I wrote down like with Poor Heart is like it was quick, but it was a hootenanny. Like people were
Hmm.
screaming, like you could tell the crowd was like back. Oh, okay, all right, because even my friend would have been a new song. I didn't think about that at this time, but like my friend would have been a relatively new song for everybody to hear. Um, so you kind of hear the crowd come back into it with the next two, which leads up to, you know, probably the highlight of the first set musically, which is the first set Bowie closer.
Oh yeah.
Um, very much on pace with Divide Sky. I think Divide Sky was 13 plus minutes and Bowie was like 12 plus minutes. And kind of going back to what I said earlier, about that this era of the band is that like once you heard the notes of Divide Sky and Bowie, you knew you were going to be in for double digit, jam time. And this one definitely does not disappoint. Really tight, uh, jumps off crazy at the 9 minute mark. And
Oh yeah.
I don't know if it's just because of the mix or where my attention was because of how it was just brought up in the beginning, but the Baby Grand just sounds phenomenal on this Bowie. Phenomenal.
Yeah, I was very happy with this Bowie. Yeah, it was clear, it was tight. I was I was blown away. I would have been very happy to hear that as a set one closer in '93.
Yeah, right. And I think one of the funny things there is like I wrote it down because it's like when he said it, I was like, oh my God, I don't think I've ever heard Trey say that. And he said, we'll be right back, don't go away. And I was like, they're not even that big yet. Like they're still
Yeah, no,
worried about people leaving at set break, like because they got a little weird or whatever, right? Like
yeah,
I was like, oh shit, that's a crazy thing to think about, right? That they just burned it down with that Bowie. And they're like, all right, yeah, don't go away. We'll be back. Right. Like we know, dude. Like now we're like, no need to say that. Like we'll be here. We promise.
yeah. It's weird to think about because obviously my whole life Phish has been fairly big. But this is pre Jerry Garcia's death.
Certainly is by 2+ years, right?
Hmm.
So, I'm of the belief that about 94, Phish took over the mantle of, the best jam band in America as far as like a night by night basis of just turning out
Yeah.
the best improvisational music. But the Dead were still playing pretty well in '93. To your point, Jerry Garcia band was touring. There was a lot to go see. But yeah, here they were. Please stay.
Please
We'll
don't
be
leave.
back. Yeah, we'll be back in the second set. So they come back fired up in the second set, to say the least.
Oh yeah.
Um, so a Runaway Jim second set opener, always great. It's almost like a punch you in the eye first set opener.
Hmm.
You kind of know you're in for a good time for that one, and this one's no different. I don't think there's a non-energetic '93 Runaway Jim.
Yeah, I mean, Runaway Jim is one of those songs for me that I've heard forever. My dad's name is Jim.
Ah, so
Back in the '90s, he would run around the entire venue.
that's and now happy that there was no cell phones and videos to record.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And like I grew up on long car trips. He'd play the 1 hour Runaway Jim.
And tell you kids he's only going to play one Phish song on the trip.
Yeah, exactly. One Phish
Yeah.
song, don't worry. It's
Don't
only
worry, I'm
one
only going to
hour
play
long.
one. Yeah, yeah. Dad, is this the same song? Promise, guys, it's the same song. This one's a little less than an hour, but it does get, I think, the familiarity back in the crowd and like definitely lock back in. And then into It's Ice, which like you take,
Takes it all away again.
yeah. Well, and I took for granted that like the sound of the piano now in that song, right? Like it's just like duh, it's like you're gonna have that. But like in this version, I felt like it was probably to your point earlier about Page's energy and being able to play it for the first time live. It comes through on this version too.
I agree. I agree. It's Ice is another one of my favorites. Um, it's always strong. The lyrics are great. Just putting it all together.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think that's one of the better lyrically driven songs on Rift, which has some good lyrically driven songs. But like the whole story of that song is really cool. And like the duality of it all. I've always loved that, staring back at yourself kind of thing. And I love the idea in literature of like man versus himself, like, being your own worst enemy kind of shit.
Yeah, and
And
like the almost losing to yourself. Yeah,
yeah, right, exactly.
he's throwing several punches and he's blocking most of mine.
Right, right, right. You're fighting yourself, right? Constantly fighting yourself. So I think that's one I agree with, like lyrically, and it's kind of got that weird Tom Marshall, kind of double entendre, wink wink stuff going on to it too, which is you got to be in for that
Oh yeah,
as well.
like Wolfman's brother in Hoist, the
Right.
the with Liz.
Yeah, and I think that's where again, another track off of Rift, right? So, I couldn't imagine the stats on the Stat Boys on this night, you're getting a lot off the album that came out yesterday. Um, but yeah, now they go back to what everyone would have known would be a jam vehicle, but Tweezer. And this is a really, really good version.
Yep,
Um,
it's not exceptionally long, but
no,
no, but it is great. And it was
it's
very clear that they were having a good time.
yeah, 12 minutes, right? And but really, they explore it. And then right around the 9 minute mark, it just no, I'm sorry, that was my Bowie note. No, about the 8, 9 minute mark is when this just thing starts where it becomes like really, really kick ass towards the end of that, like real peak tension release stuff that they were so good at back then.
Hmm.
So that gets the crowd worked up into a complete frenzy. So what do? You break
Slow
out
it
the
down.
acoustic. You take an acoustic guitar solo, folks. So Trey, again, another thing that doesn't happen anymore. Again, I don't remember in '94. It's been a lot of years since then, but I don't particularly remember in '94 him playing the acoustic before, in Horse or in My Friend. But you get a really nice acoustic to your point earlier, Trey's The Horse in its original carnation
Hmm.
into another one of my favorite songs on Riff, which when I looked at the track list to Riff today, was surprised to look back and remember that was the last song on the album.
Yep, it finishes it off
Yeah, and I was like,
after he's
oh,
woken up.
huh. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't remember that was the final song on that album. But that's always one that like I've catch myself singing way too loudly,
Oh yeah.
um, at concerts or at home. But it's great. Page sounds amazing, and like we talked about earlier, everything on Rift here just sounds incredible.
Yeah. Right before my friend took over my life the last few weeks, I was hooked on Silent in the Morning, just jamming that one out in my car every day to work.
It's a good one. It's a good one to get hyper fixated on too because there's good lyrics. There's like the music's really good, right? It's kind of longish,
Hmm.
if you count the horse part. Um, but you're gonna make me go back and listen to the Rift album now. Is that
So
available on vinyl? Is it
I
available on
just got it
vinyl?
on vinyl this week. It was so hard to get my hands on.
All right, so that'll be my next one. I just got Billy Breathe and listened to that this weekend on vinyl, and
Nice.
that
I
sounds
got that
really
one
good.
on Cyber Monday, I think, from Dry Goods.
It sounded really good. It sounded
Yeah.
real good. So Rift will be the next one for sure. So
Oh
keeping
yeah.
with that Rift theme, and much like Poor Heart, Sparkle brings out the hootenanny in the crowd, and they are in from go.
Oh yeah.
So the energy that the tension and release and the up and down of the set with the horse, the acoustic, and then the upbeat silent, and get crazy Sparkle leads into the probably the most exploratory part of the night, of all the songs where, people want to say type two or, whatever type jam it was. But this
Hmm.
one, this Yem, this You Enjoy Myself, it's interesting because like there's alternative lyrics. There's a My Girl piano tease in there somewhere. Um, but like it goes back to what you're saying before about like this weird fun music in a because they got really weird with it.
They got super weird with it. This is one I was able to listen to right before the podcast, so my memory's fresh. and I had never heard this alternative lyrics before. I was very surprised.
Water
Uh,
your team in a beehive.
yeah. I
I would
mean,
sent you. Yeah.
it, yeah,
Yeah.
I was fully expecting the Washu Fizi Drive Me to Frenzy, and then to totally like I even started singing it when they were gonna start singing it, and then I was like, what are they doing?
And
But
they go off. Yeah, go ahead.
no, yeah, they go wild. They go everywhere with this jam. I felt like, yeah, it's like listening to four different songs in one.
21 minutes. And I'm surprised it's that long. You
Yeah,
know, honestly, like I was like, oh, that's a fast 21 minutes because it's definitely the longest song of the night. But 13-minute mark, it is when it just starts jumping, right? Like it gets into that really exploratory uh place that they could get to in 93, you know, with the style of plays that they had at their disposal. Probably, you know, some of the best stuff that definitely of the night as far as jamming goes and improvisation goes.
oh yeah, I'd agree. I'd say listening to the show, that's probably my highlight is that Yem. Um, Either that or the Divided Sky.
I think I would
Uh,
agree with you. I think I would agree with that statement, man. Yeah, I think I really like that intro to the wedge. But I do think that Yem is the MVP of the show.
mhm.
So we come out of the MVP of the show, and that doesn't mean we don't have still have fun ahead of us. But another debut right after that, and we bring it back down, and it's Life Point.
Yep.
But it's really tight, crisp. First, like I wouldn't have thought that would have been the first time they played that live, and how tight it was. And it doesn't come out until Hoist, right?
Yeah, it doesn't come out for another full year.
So I wonder if that was a leftover from Rift.
Yeah, I was thinking about that myself because I obviously I noticed a Hoist song in there and I was like curious where it came from. You know, whether they just had it in the backlog and then threw it in the Hoist album. But so I didn't realize until just now that this was a debut actually.
Yeah, and well, I think Trish says at the end, he's like, "Oh, it's the first time we played it." But that's like it. Like that was the thing. I was like, "Oh wow, that sounds really tight for a song that doesn't come out for another year."
Yeah.
You know, whereas like if you go into how they workshopped all those songs for Billy Breeze, and like some of them don't even sound the same or
Oh yeah.
aren't even the same by the time they get there. That one's pretty much what it is.
Yep. I mean
It's
that
pretty much a done deal by the time you hear it in 93, by the time it hits Hoist in 94.
yeah, it sounded just like it did on the Hoist album.
Or you would hear it today, right? I don't
Yeah.
think there's a lot of difference in it, you know. Something you don't really hear today, which now that we're talking about it, I think I saw one in Pittsburgh a while ago, but the Hold Your Head Up intro to welcoming Fishman back out front for a real quick terrapin, big ball jam. But
Yeah.
this is kind of where they let everybody know Marley will be going on tour with them for the first time. And for those young people, Marley was Trey's dog who toured with the band. But because as Fishman put it, he's too old and too fat.
Yep.
So
This is my first time ever hearing a big ball jam. I had seen him before in some set lists, but it was interesting to hear.
they don't
I
stand
have
up. They don't stand
yeah
up. Like it's not something on tape. Like it was a cool idea that like it doesn't stand up on tape, right? It's better live than on tape for sure.
yeah yeah that's sort of what I've heard about it before, and it's been retired for the most part. Um, but but yeah, it was interesting. I I have heard "Hold Your Head Up" before, which was nice. I saw that in Alpine Valley in 22.
When they
Uh,
introduced him, when they did it there.
yeah, they debuted. I mean, it's a one time, but they played "Broken Heart Attack." It was fun.
Yeah, and I think, and in my head, maybe it's like they used to do it so much with more regularity. Like he doesn't come out as much as he used to do a song. So I think maybe
Mhm.
it's more so like in my head that like it's just not done as much anymore versus they're playing something else instead of it.
Yeah, I mean, they're getting older. Getting up and running around isn't as easy anymore.
No, that's true. That's true. Yeah, but he's the kind of guy who would give it a shot at least.
Yeah, he like
You
jumped on
know,
the piano at Alpine Valley. It was
listen,
pretty crazy.
he if he's playing those drums, his cardio's got to be pretty freaking good the way he plays those drums, man.
Oh,
And
for sure.
he's just like one of those like little fat athletes they got out there. Just like he's still got that athlete in him somewhere, but there's a lot of miles on him.
Hmm.
And as he so eloquently says at the end of this, as they're wrapping up, all right, we're going to go back to being serious now, and they go into Possum. And this one, really just a perfect representation of like a early 90s Possum.
Hmm.
Close out the second set, 12 minutes, just like real fun, get crazy. But like another way that they've brought the audience like on this roller coaster ride here in the second set, but ending it on this high note of Possum, right? And
Oh
then
yeah.
to keep with that theme, they come out for the debut with no microphones, full a cappella of Amazing Grace. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
Yep.
So that's the first time played for that one as well, and the last debut of the night. And you can kind of hear the crowd kind of get over themselves a little bit there. Like they start giggling a little bit, and they're like, "Oh, this is serious. Like they're gonna go."
Yeah.
But then they really shut the fuck up and let
They
you could really hear them.
they did. I actually have in my notes here, choppers from 30 years ago killing my vibe. People just talking.
There are some people talking. See, and it's an epidemic, folks. It's been going on for 30, 40 years now. It's not. This isn't anything new. Tarps are new. Choppers are not.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, no, there's a funny one. I was listening on re-listen. You can hear somebody talking about somebody's wedding, like, "Oh yeah, we're at their wedding," and I'm like, "Oh man, like these old tapes are great." Um, and then the best 3 minutes in rock and roll to send everybody home, Tweezer reprise,
Oh, Tweet
and
Price.
yeah, I mean this is talk about llama. This was my song in the car that like before I used to go to have to drive to work, like that last 3 minutes,
Hmm.
Tweezer reprise.
Oh yeah.
Like
And
it's just like a kick you in the ass, get going.
oh yeah. I mean, you can never go wrong with Tweet Price either. It's always fun. And it's always a great ender to a show. You get to walk out feeling the energy from Tweet Price.
Yeah, it's kind of like how you were talking about your experience with Chalk Dust at your first show, right? Like you're like leaving on that high
Hmm.
of, really feeling that music, like that everybody all in it, high energy feeling that is very, very difficult or almost impossible to replicate outside of, that kind of experience.
Yep.
So what
Yeah.
did you think of the show?
I thought it was great. I mean, Riff being my favorite album, you can't go wrong with a show like this. I'm gonna have a great time no matter what. Um,
Totally. Bro, we hit it like 100% out of the park. Like me picking this show at random, you were the perfect person
the
to hear this show.
I even noticed, so obviously Riff being my favorite album, I knew a lot about it. I knew the release day and you said you put 2 393, and I was like, oh, the day after Rift, this thing's gonna be full of Rift, and I was right. It's just chock full of it.
And the reason why I chose it, it was, and maybe this is, and in hindsight, maybe this is part of the reason, is that there was a really quality bootleg of this show that went around.
Hmm.
And maybe it was because like maybe Phish released it. That was always some of the things back in the day, like when Juicy Soundboard got out, like the band wanted people to hear it, like here,
Yeah.
get this out to the community. And I'm wondering if that was the case here because they were gonna be touring so much, like you want this stuff to kind of get out there,
Yeah.
before they come to your town, right? Like you want them to know who you are. But that's the reason why I chose this. This was I didn't get to see him until the end of this year of '93, but this was one that was definitely in the collection quality sound of, but really showed this band that was about to go burn America down for the next six months.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I'd ask you a little homework to recommend a show to me, post 2011.
Yes.
So, which show do you think it is that I should listen to?
So, this is a very popular one, so I hope you haven't heard it before.
Okay.
But this is a show I was invited to go to that I turned down because I didn't think I'd be interested enough, and I am very upset that I turned it down. But it's 7/14/19 Alpine Valley. It was a huge bust out show. I mean, it's like top 20 shows of all time or something on Phish.net.
Is that the Ruby Wave show or no?
It is the Ruby Wave show.
Okay, I have not listened to it, so I may have
So
listened to Ruby Waves, like obviously a Phish Radio or something. I probably heard it,
yeah,
but no, I have not listened to that show beginning to end. So I'm excited to. Cool.
yeah, I would. That's my recommendation. My dad was there. He came back and told me about how amazing it was.
Was that the last show you said you weren't going to go to?
Um, Probably. I don't know if he invited me to all the 2020, obviously COVID,
Yeah.
and then 2021 I skipped out. I don't know if they played Alpine Valley though, but
Well, you're never going to skip a show now when you have the
never. I
chance.
mean,
So
if it's within a state or two, I'm driving.
they got a good jump off point, man. Like I think that's the beauty of where they're playing now is it's kind of there's some strategy behind it on their end, right? Like I think it'll be interesting to see how they play the East Coast with the festival being on the East Coast
Hmm.
this summer, because whether the West and the Midwest get some love, or they just kind of stay close, we'll see. But
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to listening to that one. Alpine Valley is like, it's one of those venues in Phish lore, history, whatever you want to look at it, that resonates.
hmm
Deer Creek and Alpine Valley and Red Rocks and Dick's and those play MSG. Those
Yeah.
places are almost like points on a map for people to check off to see the band, and you're lucky enough to be that close.
Yeah.
That's great.
An hour, 1 hour exactly from my home. It's it's phenomenal, and it's probably the best venue I've ever been to. There's not a bad spot in the house. I get a lawn seat every time. Doesn't matter where I am. I get a great clear view of the band.
And it's a pretty big place, right?
Yeah, it's pretty big. I want to say like I don't know, 60,000, 70,000 capacity, maybe more.
That's big. That's big for an outdoor place.
Yeah, it's massive, and it's all like a valley,
Is there
it's
camping too?
I that's a great question. I don't know.
Like
Um
Deer Creek? Yeah, I don't know.
there might be something
There might be.
nearby.
Yeah, there might be. I'm not sure.
But I mean obviously I don't camp there. I got
Yeah,
one
you're
hour
an hour from
drive.
home, man. Sleep in your bed. Sleep in your bed.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. Well, this was great, man. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry. Good, good.
No, 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 I'm good. I'm done. I did look up the capacity. I was off. It's about 40,000. But
Listen, I don't have 20,000 friends, so it me and my closest 39,999 friends fulfill into Alpine Valley just nicely. Thank you.
Oh yeah.
Unless they oversell like SPAC.
Oh no.
But yeah, no, this has been cool, man. I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk about this show from, a heyday era for your dad and I, but just something that's not going to come up usually when you spin the wheel on live Phish. And great to hear what it sounds like to somebody, who's getting their feet under them and figuring out what they like about this band too. So I appreciate it.
For sure. Thanks for having me on. I always love to talk about them.
Yeah, that's why I started this. My wife doesn't want to hear it, that's for sure. So
my friends are tired of it.
That's it. So thank you so much. Look forward to talking to you again, and hopefully we'll cross paths somewhere at some point at some show.
For sure.
It's all right.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Happened once before.
Have a great day.
Good day.
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to be a guest on an upcoming episode or recommend a show for a future podcast, contact me at This Happened Once Before podcast on Facebook, at THOB podcast on Instagram, or at happenedoncebefore@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and I hope this happens once again.
Sucks from my only breath that I have breathed since I was 10. I hope this happens once again.